Hi, friend. What a terrific week we've had in our first week of Jonah. Thank you for being a part of this journey. I know I'm very thankful to be here with you. Wow. Is your mind blown by this first chapter of Jonah? I know mine is, as well as my heart. This does something good for our hearts, friends. So unpacking on day 5 really is just a wrap up to make sure we have, I don't know, gathered the message of this first chapter of Jonah as best we can, right? We could study this again in a year or in 5 years, and we probably would find more things. But for this week, where did we land? It is always good to do a chapter summary of what took place in this chapter. Friends, we see God calls out to Jonah. He gives him a word. We know, we've talked about the who. Jonah is a prophet, right? Meaning he is a servant of God and he knows the will of God. He also interprets the will of God for others. So clearly God gives him a word. He tells Jonah, arise, get up, go to Nineveh and call out to Nineveh. Why? Because God has seen the evil there. He's seen the evil. And what is he doing? What is God's doing? What is God, did I say that right? What is God's heart in sending Jonah to Nineveh? Well, the cross reference that we saw this week comes from later on in Jonah. Jonah knows that God has this heart of mercy, a heart of grace, and he's calling out. He wants Jonah to go and call out to Nineveh that they might receive God's forgiveness and turn from their evil ways. But Jonah, we talked about this at the beginning of the week. Jonah is an Israelite, right? He himself tells the sailors, I am a Hebrew. The people of Nineveh, of Assyria, these are Israel's enemies. Jonah doesn't want to see them saved. He doesn't want them to experience God's forgiveness. No, he wants them utterly destroyed. And so Jonah goes in the complete opposite direction. Nineveh is east, Joppa is west, and it is on the sea. So Jonah thinks he's going to flee from the presence of God. Anybody else ever thought that they could flee from the presence of God? Maybe we've not ever really thought that, but certainly I think we all have gone in the complete opposite direction that God calls us to. Like, God has given us a word. He's given his word to us. It's the Bible. We know what is right? And if this isn't enough, as believers in Jesus, he also gives us his spirit. He's drawn so near to us that his spirit lives within us when we trust in him. So we have everything we need to know God's will, to know his word, and to obey his word. And even so, I just put for question number 6, oh golly, I am no different than Jonah. It's a choice. It is a choice to obey God or disobey. But friends, I think the biggest thing that stands out to me this week is God's grace. When he says in Exodus, the Lord, a God gracious and merciful, slow to anger, steadfast in love and faithfulness, that really is who he is. And we see God pursue Jonah. We see clearly from this story, there's nowhere we can run or hide from God. Oh, God pursues Jonah in a big way to get Jonah's attention. And this is his grace. This is his grace to Jonah. It is his grace even as we see to these sailors, to these mariners, to this crew on the ship. They are introduced to Yahweh, to God, the maker of the heavens and the earth and the seas and everything in it. We see in this chapter, at first, they're praying to their many different gods, but then they end up praying to Yahweh. And in the end, when God quiets that storm, after they obey this word of casting or hurling Jonah into this tempest, into this wild sea, they see the sea calm and they believe in God. God saves them. They believe in him. They trust in him, and they end up worshiping Yahweh, the Lord God Almighty. Oh, friends, when we put on our first century, or not first century, but our ancient Near East glasses, we would understand that the listeners to this story would be absolutely blown away. Like, oh, these pagans come to know Yahweh and put their trust in him and worship him. This is shocking. And God's grace to them would have been shocking. God's grace to Nineveh would have shocked their socks off. And God's grace to Jonah would have surprised them. Jonah, a disobedient believer, a disobedient servant of the Lord. God pursues him and extends his grace to him, such that, being hurled into this wild tempest, into the wild sea, that was a death sentence. But God rescues Jonah. And friends, that is the heart of God. That is the heart of God. He is gracious and merciful. He is slow to anger. He is abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. And we see this in the life of Jonah. Friends, this ought to give us hope. I know it gives this prone to wonder girl hope. As a believer in Jesus Christ, as a believer in the Lord God Almighty, yes, my heart, my mind, I am prone to wonder, but God will pursue us, friends. In the midst of our disobedience, he knows how to get our attention. This ought to give us hope. Our God sees us. He knows us. He pursues us because he has a heart of grace and mercy and steadfast love and faithfulness. What a great week. I'll look forward to seeing you again for chapter 2 of Jonah.